Okay, so welcome back to the drawing board. In the last video, we talked about the basic waveforms, right? Sine waves, square waves, saw waves, triangle waves, right? And it's really important that you understand, those basics, because with sound design, everything compounds, okay? Now, I want to talk to you in this video about the different forms of synthesis, and these are the ones that are most common to me. There's tons of different types of synthesis out there, but I want to tell you this first before we get into this video. If you were like me when I was first starting up, I tried to research all these different types of synthesis. I literally went into Google and I typed like different forms of synthesis, and then you click on the first page and you're going to see a title about subtractive synthesis, and it's going to give you a paragraph. After I was done reading that paragraph, I really did not know the difference between any of these. It's taken me years to at least start grasping the concepts of what these different types of synthesis are, okay? Now, the reason why I've listed out these ones here is because these are the ones that I commonly use, except for additive synthesis. There's a plugin called Additive Keys. But yeah, so additive synthesis is a type of synthesis which I have never used, but I added it here because you're going to read about it. And there are also synths out there. And I also read a really cool fun fact about additive synthesis. So let's reference back our three basic principles: oscillators, envelopes, and filters. You have to learn these to learn sound design at, a really decent level. So with oscillators, our whole goal here is to generate a sound source. Okay. So when we talk about the different types of synthesis, all of these, what they're doing is they're just creating a sound. That's all that they're doing, okay? You don't have to worry about, I want to create this type of sound or that type of sound. When you're first learning, just think about these. All they're doing is creating a sound for us, a foundation. If you want to add a sine wave, a square wave, okay? And then what happens is the oscillator constantly loops over that waveform, and that's how you get the sound. So the oscillator is your sound. And when we talk about these more in depth in this video, you're going to see that all that we're doing is we're just creating a sound. Now, to take it to the next step, then you can start adding on those envelopes, those filters, and really create some really powerful sounds, okay? So let's first start with additive synthesis. So the cool fun fact I learned about additive synthesis is that you can, in theory, create any sound in the entire world just by sine waves, okay? So again, the theory is you can use an unlimited amount of sine waves at different frequencies and at different volumes, so amplitudes. Again, the theory says that you can create any sound. So, obviously I've never tried that, but again, that's the concept behind additive synthesis. So when you hear the word additive synthesis out there, it's sine waves. That's all it is, okay? Now again, I do not own any synths that do additive synthesis, but I do believe Native Instruments has one, and it's called Razor, and it's just spelled like this, I believe, okay? So if you want to get into additive synthesis or whatever, you guys can check that synth out. Okay, so let's move into subtractive synthesis, okay? So subtractive synthesis is actually our most common form of synthesis. And what you're doing is you're using your different waveforms, your square waves, your saw waves, okay? Stuff like that. And what you're doing is you're creating tons and tons of frequencies, okay? And then you use a filter to subtract, to remove frequencies, okay? Again, I'm going to keep referencing these basic principles as we go. But the thing is, with subtractive synthesis, if you just set the filter just manually, whenever you press a note, the filter just stays there. And with sound design, and again, the reason why subtractive synthesis is so powerful is because we use the envelopes, okay? So, for example, the envelope is ADSR, okay? We will cover this shortly. So this is a common shape that you're going to see. You have the attack, how long it takes to get to max volume. You have the decay, how long it takes to get to the sustain. You have the sustain. If you hold down the note, it's going to stay at the sustain forever. And then you have the release, which goes down. So the release only happens when you actually let go of the note. More of that when we get into it, okay? So with subtractive synthesis, we use different waveforms, okay? This is like a square wave. This is like a saw wave, okay? Again, positive and negative, right? Same here, positive, negative. So this would be for this waveform. And whenever we press a note, the envelope can open up a filter. It can make it go fast, slow. And this is how we can start designing things like plucks, pads, okay? Stuff like that. A cool fun fact is I do not believe that we are able to create a real piano sound out of any of these types of synthesis. Okay, well, sample based, which we will get into because you actually have to record the note. Anything else though, from my research and from, when I was first starting, I was like, oh, how do I create a piano sound? I don't believe that a piano is able to be created through synthesis. We're going to get into wavetable synthesis in this video too. You literally load in a file into the plugin and you can actually go through like the wavetable. So it takes like little slices of the sound and you can loop through these different waveforms. Pretty powerful. I'm going to go through this quickly and then we're going to hop into FL Studio, okay? So with FM synthesis, how this works is, let's say we had two oscillators, okay? I'll put them just like this. So these here are actually called operators. And so what happens is one is a carrier. I write it like this. And then one is a modulator, okay? So what happens is you can send the modulator into the carrier, and imagine this was, a waveform, like a sine wave, okay? And then this here, it could be anything, right? But let's just say, we'll go for a square wave, okay? So what's gonna happen is we actually send in the sine wave into the square wave, and you can create a totally, weird kind of sound. It would just be like, kind of all weird. I'll show you that once we get into Serum, okay? But with the modulator, you can send 100%, 25%, that kind of thing. And you can make it aggressive and not. You guys can read more into FM synthesis. It's something that you do want to read into because there's something called harmonic and inharmonic. Harmonic, again, just like we were talking about, the fundamental and the harmonics, okay? Inharmonic, I believe, is kind of, it doesn't really relate to the sound and it can sound out of pitch. But I believe within sound design, that's how you can create like metallic kind of bell kind of sounds. But again, I'm going to leave you guys to read more about it. I'll show you what it is though, like once we get into FL Studio. Sample based, what this is imagine you had a guitar, you recorded a note into a microphone, into your computer. Now you're just going to drag that guitar file into a plugin and you can affect it however you want with like this ADSR stuff, with envelope. Well, this is an envelope, filters, reverb, plugins, all this different types of stuff. That's with sample base. So let's say we actually recorded our guitar sound and it just looks like this, okay? So one thing you have to be careful of with sample based is your sample could be out of pitch. And when I say sample, I mean that it's your guitar note that you recorded into a microphone, into your computer. Your guitar is your sample, okay? So if we have our guitar note here, and now let's say we have another synth. Let's say this is like Serum, or let's go like S, okay? This is Serum. So let's say all our synths, all our presets from like Serum is 440 hertz, okay? So in other words, it's going to be in pitch with all the other presets. Let's say it was Silent 1 or whatever. But let's say our guitar wasn't tuned, right? So like we just played the note in the guitar into the microphone, and let's say it comes out at like 419 hertz, okay? Let's just say that this guitar was out of tune. Unless you have one of those digital guitar tuners. So for example, like I'm just going to show you right here, you really don't know what pitch it is in. I'm sure you could probably download on your phone too, like a musical tuner or something like that, okay? But what I'm trying to get at is when you record the sample, it could be out of pitch. So it may not be in pitch with these synths, okay? So this is a problem. What you can do to resolve that is, well, on your sampler, so when you drag the file into the actual plugin, you can just correct the pitch. You could raise the pitch to make it 440 hertz, okay? That's going to take a little bit of time to kind of get it right, but it's important that you do so that you can use this sample with other sounds. Okay, so for our last one here, before we hop into FL Studio, is Granular. Now, in my readings, again, I'm still pretty new to sound design too. Like I've been doing it for probably like 4 or 5 years, so I know what's going on, but sound design has such a huge history that you really have to read into it to know really what's going on, okay? So again, when I tell you these things, I'm going to tell you that this is like what I read in an article so that you could do more reading on, okay? But supposedly granular synthesis is like based off of wavetable synthesis. But anyways, what it's doing is, let's say it takes like that waveform, okay? It slices it into what's called grains. And then with those grains, you can play them in various different ways. Like you can make them go forward, you can make them go backwards, you can pitch them up, pitch them down. Really powerful stuff, okay? So a lot of talking. In our next video, we are going to be getting into what these actually are, okay? So again, I don't use additive synthesis, okay? So we're just going to be covering subtractive, wavetable, FM synthesis, sample-based synthesis, and granular. A quick recap though, additive, only sine waves. Okay, that's the theory behind additive, and we can literally create any sound within the world, so they say. Subtractive, what you're doing is you're using these basic waveforms, okay? Again, these basic waveforms are important because they're going to be in every synth that you're going to be using, okay? So square wave, saw wave, we are creating these oscillators. It's generating our sound inside of subtractive synthesis, and then we use envelopes and filters to remove that richness, remove that high end, okay, remove those extra frequencies and mold a sound. Wavetable, you can just create these different wavetables and you can actually go through the sound, okay? Once we get into Serum, which you saw in the last video when I showed you the basic stuff, okay? That's a wavetable, and again, you can load in any sound you want. There's tons of tutorials on even how to create your own wavetables if you want to get into that. But again, that is kind of a different, path of learning this stuff. If you just want to learn sound design, that's what this course is on. Wavetable, like someone could make a huge course just on creating your own wavetables. Like it's a whole totally different industry. So if you're wanting to make if you're wanting to be like a beat maker, then I would say what I'm going to teach you here is like what you need to know and then keep going. But if you wanted to learn this in depth, right, that's the stuff, that's the route you'd want to go. FM synthesis, so what it does is there's operators. And in this case, I have two operators. One is a carrier, one is a modulator. We can actually route the modulator into the carrier. And it's also important that you can't hear this, okay? So you actually mute it, and then but you can still send the signal through. Sample-based is actually recorded samples and it plays through the whole sample, okay? But what happens is now you can affect it with things such as your attack. So this is like envelopes, filters, effects, and you can create really cool sounds out of the sample. Granular, what you're doing is you're taking a sample, and I believe that you're just kind of slicing it up into what's called grains, and you can affect those grains in, not even music, okay? You can affect it to the point where it's like, dude, like that's a weird sound. Okay, let's check it out in FL Studio.